How do you feel your personal experience of trauma? I'm just gonna say trauma now instead of the mouthful of cPTSD. Um,
Right. I
how
know
does
what you
your got it.
mean.
How did your personal experience with trauma and how it
Yeah.
was sort of like showing up in your life and in your
Mhm.
work, how did it connect with the climate crisis and
Mhm.
how like how do you see it connecting? You could do that on like a large level, broad scale, or you could bring it down to the personal level or both. I'll leave that to you.
Mhm. Sure. Right, 'cause so I say in the book, the personal is ecological, the ecological is personal. That's really abstract. What does that really mean, you know? How does someone really live into this experience of, being able to connect your personal trauma with kind of planetary pain or the ecological crisis or whatnot? Um, and so I will say something. I'll be very. I'm going to take a sip of coffee here because it's always good to take a little sip of coffee before you say something that's a little scary.
Well, that sweet
But
bean residue does give us courage.
yes, and thank goodness the coffee is related to chacruna. So we're in business. Um, so to answer your question really pointedly, um, so I was abused by my mom in water until I was almost an adult. And so that's what I'll say about that. But that is not gratuitous, as you know, that's not gratuitous information. That information is really important in answering your question because yes, my mom was my abuser. I could not escape. And it was harrowing. And uh, so I needed to be remothered. I had deep mother wounds. And so what I could, and I think my addictive behaviors were an expression of my desire to be remothered in a weird way. Um, I think um, I think my experiences on meditation retreats, like I've always heard, I've heard meditation described as kind of reparenting, a form of reparenting, which was really helpful. But also to be in water, right? I said I what I just said about my mom and what she did to me in water, right? Like to be in water, to be in the ocean. Um, I I first so in a sense that was its own kind of exposure therapy, like being in water and being with these beautiful dying creatures. I was 9 when I first saw first saw a coral reef. I grew up in Florida. A lot of Canadians come down, I know, to our state, and so I was 9 when I snorkeled my first reef, and those were beautiful dying um, ecosystems even at that time, and no one said that they were dying. I don't think anyone even knew they were dying, but I knew they were dying. And so and I was, I'm holding hands with my mom. My family is we're all underwater together snorkeling, and so, neurons that, fire together, wire together, somehow for me, the sadness I felt at those reefs, being in the presence of these beautiful dying creatures, and the pain that I felt growing up in my family, that got intertwined for me somehow, some way. And my magical thinking was, all I have to do is find a pristine, healthy reef. And that trauma circuitry can just be kind of pulled out of my brain. And I can be healed. I can be remothered. I can be restored to innocence. And that's really what we want for the planet, in a sense, is to be restored to its innocence. Impossible at this point, but that's what I think a lot of us yearn for. So uh, I think that so going to Raja Ampat, going to these islands in Indonesia that are so remote, that shelter the most biodiverse reefs in the world and some of the last intact coral reefs on the planet, being underwater, I met Mother Earth face to face. And coral even has little uric acid eye spots, so it can see. It was looking at me. I know it was looking at me. I was looking at it, and to spend time with those creatures, to spend time with manta rays, dugongs, which are like like a really large manatee, moray eels, orangutan crabs with orange fur. I mean, insanely beautiful. You could even say psychedelic creatures. Um, I developed a relationship with them, and I felt safe. I wasn't afraid of sharks. I like sharks. I don't like jellyfish, but I'll look at a jellyfish from afar. I like everything under the ocean, even the banded sea snake, which is so poisonous. It's beautiful. Looks like the Hamburglar's snake. But anyway, um, so being underwater like that, yes, I felt the beauty and the love from these creatures. But I also, just like I did when I was in Florida at age 9, instead I'm 35, I'm underwater with these creatures, and I'm feeling the pain of having contributed to their decline for unintentionally helping to destroy these creatures, which are so, so sensitive to temperature. And so I'm feeling this ecological pain. I know the Great Barrier Reef at that time is bleaching and dying. Um, it's in a far worse bleaching event actually right now, as we speak. But but I felt that ecological pain. But I also, because I was so relaxed and because I didn't have my drug of choice, there was no Wi-Fi signal, there was no cell signal. Childhood flashbacks came up for me in a really big way, but I was able to kind of experience those because I had the safety that I felt with these reefs. So it gave me a taste, as I said a little earlier, of what it's like to feel safe in relationship with another creature. I never forgot that. And I had to go back home. And going back home, I was confronted with the dystopian shit show that we live in, and was soon kind of back to square one. But I never forgot that feeling. Um, and so I think I think this, being with these reefs, I was able to kind of, the planetary and the personal really got blurred for me. And I feel that, you know, these childhood flashbacks, but also these ecological flash forwards, like imagining what the planet will be like in 2030, 2040, 2050, in my lifetime and in your lifetime. Those childhood flashbacks and those, ecological flash forwards, they felt eerily similar because I felt panic, I felt doom, and frankly, I don't have a starship yet, entrapment. This is our planet. We can't really leave very easily. So, so those are some ways that, that my trauma kind of, you know, got me to maybe understand the ecological crisis and feel into it. But also we live in a society that is so divorced from nature. And when you're that divorced from nature and that divorced from your body and divorced from elders with true wisdom, when you're that divorced from common sense, which is what the situation I think that we're in right now, there's going to be psychiatric problems. There are going to be psychiatric problems, right? And so, in a way, what my mom did to me was it makes sense. Like she was she was trying to clean me, right? She was trying to purify me. And in a way, that's kind of what we want to do to the planet, you know? And so and in a way, I see my family, or really any family, or any aspect of our culture, as being a kind of a microcosm for the larger climate crisis, right? So it's just it's gimme, gimme, gimme. And we see that in abusive situations. We see that in with people with addictions, you know, they're unable to stop the gimme, gimme, gimme. And the carbon industrial complex that we've created in our culture, that too is gimme, 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 and it will be our
Right.
undoing.
Traumatized and traumatizing, the way that you mentioned it. It's
Mhm.
like so disconnected
Mhm.
from the living world that there's no sense of the amount of abuse that's happening to the living world while they gimme, gimme, gimme.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm.
Exactly. So those aren't sort of, those are it's like when I think about the ecological crisis, it helps me better understand my trauma. And then when I think about my trauma, it's also a way into understanding like if like when I remember myself as an addict, that was I was kind of a, you know, I'm kind of a microcosm of the larger system of 8 billion people all trying to, to all wanting more, and then because that's the dopamine. That's how we're wired. So I think that you know I feel that my mom's abuse of me really gave me, in some ways it was the greatest blessing of my life, because not only did it prepare me to be underwater to meet Mother Earth face to face, right? But it also led me to meet Mother Ayahuasca, Madre Ayahuasca, and ayahuasca itself, like that. I think of that as an eco sacrament. I think of that as an activator of ecological conscience, and so that too enabled me to, the next morning after a ceremony, hearing the illegal loggers in the Amazon going at it in the forest, like you don't you don't forget that. The rainforest saved my life. Mother Earth saved my life. And so I feel very passionate about, I guess you could say Mother Earth healed my personal trauma. And so now I feel compelled to reciprocate and try and ease the planetary suffering, the ecological pain that's going on. So, um, a lot of ways to get at that question, and but it's something that's it's really near and dear to my heart. It's really thinking about, this, the humanity and culture, excuse me, nature and human culture. Like we really need to blur that distinction, and we also need to blur the distinction between personal and planetary trauma, because what is planetary trauma but the sum of all the injuries that all these different beings, many of whom are not human beings, are experiencing. Like it's the sum of that, I think. So um so it's a great question. I think I might even write a second book just to say more about it.